Coming back this week, let's see what new topics we can dig up. And the first thing that you and I were talking about before we got on the air. Now remind me, wait, what was, because now I have this other thing in my head that I want to talk about.
The big thing was about this
search.
About whether Google's search
the dying web. Yes. Okay. There was a great article from, I think it was Platformer, was not on Substack anymore, but moved. The conversation was talking about, or the headline was the dying web.
Yeah.
And the whole conversation was that with AI changing the way that we query and receive information, that the traditional way of searching and getting links was dying, that the number of people searching and then going into those links and clicking through on those links was dying and reducing. And what people were doing was two things. Number one, on Google, I don't know Bing, but on Google, if you search something, a lot of times now on the top of the page, it will give you AI-generated responses based on the initial links. Mm-hmm. All right, so you either have that or you have ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude that were asking these things. This goes back to something that you said, which is in our past weeks, people are using the first answer they're getting. Yeah. In the same way you have a search engine and you click on the first link, people are using that first answer that they're getting. But is that the good answer? And are we fundamentally seeing a shift in the way that people query, search, and gather information?
Yeah, I can talk to my experience, so I'd like to hear yours as well. But I certainly use ChatGPT as my LLM of choice. I certainly use ChatGPT as an initial port of call for questions that I've got. Being careful about how we ask those questions, how we structure them. But I would go to there now probably before I go to Google. But I do it with the knowledge that it's 6 months old. So if I want something that's quite new, I'm not going to get a relevant answer as easily out of ChatGPT. And I see that it quite often gives me stuff which is a little bit dated. If I want something that I need to know it's happened in the last week or so, I'm going to Google still.
But let me challenge you on the way that we search and query information, because I'm going to come back to that. As a designer, I'm thinking about how are we creating and crafting products and how are people interacting with that? If I go to Claude and ChatGPT and Gemini, we work, or the way that it's been presented is I'm prompt engineering. Yeah. It's all about, you need to know how to do your prompt engineering. There's courses on prompt engineering. Learn the top 100 to 50 prompts within your industry. If I go to Google, it's just a search.
Yep.
However, you can see both of these merging and creating the same output. One of them, because you're fundamentally asking a question.
Yeah.
If you don't understand how to query information from a generative AI source, are you going to get the best information? So imagine now that Gemini and Google search become the same thing. Imagine that ChatGPT and let's say Bing become the same thing. Prompt engineering was something that we were asking people to learn how to do that.
Yeah.
Here, when you start to get into mass usage, which you could already argue we're in, that level of understanding that I need to think about how I phrase and ask questions goes down. And my sort of ultra point here, are we going to create or consume worse output because we don't know how to query appropriately?
Yeah, absolutely. Because okay, that's a great question. So let's break it down a little bit.
You take it. I've been talking for a while.
So I think my perspective on this is that we're effectively looking at layers on the same data. We know that tools like the large language models are built on web searches. They're trained on internet-based content and largely English-based internet content. So when we use Google versus using ChatGPT, we're essentially looking at the same data set. One's probably a bit bigger than the other in that Google's got access to more modern, slightly, and probably a wider data set than was used to train the large language model, but they're essentially a very similar source. I think the danger is when you go to Google, you say, show me the latest articles on X, it'll return a set of results for you. And you'll look through it and go, that source looks like it's very ropey. I'm not going to trust anything from there. That one looks like it's a nationally reputed research place. That one, I'll weight that. I'll probably look at that first. This one's got a lot of other people engaging in discussion. So yeah, I'll give that some credence as well. ChatGPT gives you an answer. You're like, what's it based that on? And we know there's a weighting there and there's a preference for more reputable sources, but it's all a bit black box, obscure how that calculation happens. So it dumbs us down. We get back into the danger of convenience, easy answers.
Yeah, it's the convenience and the comfort I get in the first answer. It sounds, again, from an interaction design point of view, when it gives me an answer, it sounds authoritative. I trust it. This starts to get into something that has been on the top of my head, I don't know, in my brain for a while. When people ask, oh, how are you changing in the face of AI? As like a UX professional, as a designer, what are you doing to change in the face of Gen AI? If we can create all this infinite output, great, my wireframes come for free. Yeah. What we just mentioned, that's the skill. Critical thinking, analytical thinking, that when I get an answer, I understand how to construct a framework, a decision framework, some sort of structure, scaffolding that I can think, what is my argument or my hypothesis? What information do I need to query from this? And how do I use this as a thinking partner? And that is a very different set of skills. The ability to do critical thinking and sort of decision frameworks, that is a learnable set of skills, but it is something that is not inherent when you want to get the easiest thing. That's what worries me, is that the easiest thing will take over, but that's where we need to go, is good critical thinking, good analytical thinking that allows us to say, this is the first answer. How do I use this as a true thinking partner to get to the right answer?
It's the best answer.
Best, maybe not the right answer, good, best. Yeah.
But I think that's great, and actually that goes into a topic we've talked about before, about the idea of where does craft play a role in this? And I think when you look at evaluating an output from an AI tool, we do this through the lens of 20, nearly 30 years experience of playing in this field, and we know what good looks like. I think there's a lot of concern at the moment. We've talked about it. What does it mean in terms of AI threatening jobs in the workplace? And I can't help but come back to the idea that the more I play with AI, and particularly the more I build with AI, yes, we're getting to this point where single-man teams are able to do more on their own. But the only way they can do that is because, certainly in my case, I've got nearly 30 years of building things as a designer, as an information architect at points, as a data architect, as a front-end builder, as a back-end builder. And putting those together is faster and easier now because I know what the fundamental foundations are to do that. If you don't have that foundation of craft behind you, it gets very hard to know when things are going wrong. You don't know what questions to ask, or you don't know what you're being given is the value in it.
I want to take that word value. I want to step back to something that you said a few minutes ago. When you do a Google search and you get your 10 links, when you, let's say, click into one of them, or I can't remember exactly what you said, but you're like, I'm going to trust this one because there's a lot of conversation. Yeah. This one looks a little funny. There is a level of, I don't know whether you want to say gut or intuition. As a person, when I click into a site, the design of that site, the brand, the story, the emotion, that plays a role in my level of trust in that site. Yes. And here's what gets interesting. Because as a person, I am swayed by the visual design, by the brand, by the story.
By the huge amount of pop-ups that come up trying to sell you things. Yeah.
As an agent, I am not. And so if you create agents and send them out on your behalf, if Google has agents scraping this information and pulling it back, they're not looking at the story. They're looking at, let's say, the information on the page. They're looking at cross-linking to other sites. How trustworthy is this page based on whatever criteria they have? And this gets back to that idea that I think we're going to see dual strategies that companies need to have. You can create these quick one-off websites. I'll go back to that Squarespace designer. You can churn those out, right? Page after page. Okay. But what you just said, how do you ascertain, how do you discern value in something? And you can do that because you have 30 years, I have 25 years, and we can look at something and make a judgment call. Agents don't do that yet, or at least if they do, I would be curious to understand how.
But also neither do the next generation of vibe coders, the guys, and I see a lot of people out there who are making these things. If you haven't put your time in, spent your time to build your craft, worked with very smart people who have been in this industry a long time, learned what works with humans, selling to humans, then you're not going to have that foundation to come back to. And the reason why I say that is I do think it's interesting as we start designing for agents, because nobody's really done that yet. So there is a split. There is definitely a strategy there. Say, I'm going to become a designer, a builder who focuses and specializes in agents because I can lead the field that way. But I think we still sell to humans, and we will do for a long time yet.
I'm going to jump off that vibe coding thing because I see so many people now going up and spinning up. I can create my own app. I can do this. But none of it's super impressive that I've seen. Now, in a year, maybe it'll get there. That being said...
Impressive why, though? Impressive why? Okay.
So I was going to say the simplicity of it, but that's not quite true. It's that things are very simple, but it is lacking conceptual depth. Let me put it that way. I'll give you an example. At work, we just did a proposal. I can't unfortunately say who, but the RFP, the request for proposal, it was the most different thing I've seen. It literally was like, we want to build a website that is AI first, right? Everybody is. Do not come to us with a traditional website. We want to see conceptually what you think the future might look like. And the team that we had on this created something that blew my mind. And the way that this was like, if you remember the Requiem for a Dream website back in 2000, and it was all story-based. It went along with the movie. It was a marketing website, but it looked like nothing that you had seen before. That's what I saw in this. And it's that level of craft and that level of conceptual thinking that it took what existed, all the assets that we have, but it created something new that when I looked at it, I was like, I want this. This is amazing. I want this. And I wish I could show it because it was just fundamentally amazing to me. And vibe coding is, hey, I drew this picture on a bunch of boxes and I threw it out and I created it. But really to get the depth that you need. So it's like it's like when the App Store came out and, a 12-year-old can create an application. My grandmother can create an application. Sure, they can, but the best applications probably aren't coming from that audience. It's great that you democratize and enable everybody, but the best applications, the ones that are changing markets, are not coming from those individuals.
This is back to our whole ideas versus execution concept at the end of the day, that if you don't have a great idea, it doesn't matter how easy your execution is, it's ultimately going to create a product which has very little value. If you've got a great idea and you can put it out quickly, then there is value in that, but you can't do anything without the idea. So what I like about vibe coding is it does enable people with great ideas to bring them to market, because you talk to people all the time I've got a great idea for an app. I'm like, do you really? I'm like, okay, but some of them do. Some of them genuinely do. And if they were able to bring something to market without necessarily 30 years of design and digital transformation experience, that's got to be a good thing. We get more good ideas out, then great. Even if it's just to the point of getting a proof of concept, which can then be transformed into something which is production ready.
That lens that you just brought, I think, is such a great way of looking at vibe coding, and it shifts the way that people are thinking about it. Right now, what I hear is vibe coding is, this is part of what's going to replace people, right? It's going to replace how we work because look how easy it is. No, not necessarily, because if you're building complexity, you still need to understand the ins and outs of computer science and engineering. What you just said, though, is that with traditional applications right now, there is a very large set of the population that may have great ideas that cannot showcase or share those ideas with anybody because they're stuck in their head and they cannot get them out. What this enables them to do is actually get them out. So this enables more people, just again, like the App Store, or just whatever, if you want to say manufacturing, there's so many things that have democratized the ability for people to get out their ideas, and this is just another one. So if I look at it with that lens, that vibe coding is an amazing thing because it enables now another billion people to say, I can bring an idea out, and then maybe others can help me lift it up and build an actual ecosystem platform, product or service, and connect everything.
Let me say, I do think it's rare that you'll get somebody who hasn't got a capability background behind them who is doing vibe coding, producing something valuable. I think unless you've got something in terms of design or development or user experience, if you don't have one of those and you're using AI to fill the gap in the rest, I think it's unlikely that you'll be able to put something together which is generally going to change things. The only thing I'll add to that is it could be that you've got a very focused product level knowledge in a specific sector and you know that sector very well, and that you're bringing that product knowledge, that industry knowledge to bear on a solution. But those are the only situations. I think it's rare that you'll get somebody in the street who says, I've got no experience in anything, but I've got an idea for an app and I can put it into a meaningful output.
What you're saying is that we can create a long tail of people who can bring ideas maybe to a simple market.
Yeah.
Maybe there's entire marketplaces for these ideas, right? We needed the App Store from Android and iOS for a platform for people to share these ideas. Right now for vibe coding or whatever Gen AI sort of usage, there's not a centralized platform where people can easily create something and then launch it on that platform. You still have to know things like domain registration or a cloud provider if you're trying to do something. I feel there is a way that we've now created so many more jobs. We've potentially created new ecosystems and marketplaces and platforms with this. I think this is just raising everybody up. I think this is just enabling everybody. So again, this goes back to let's not put our heads in the sand. Let's embrace this because it feels like there is going to be so much more that is coming out of this. We're not able to imagine it yet, but in a few years, it's going to be a pretty different sort of employer-employee skill set marketplace.
Yeah.
Well, let's keep going.
I think what really excites me is that I'm starting to realize that using large language models, particularly, as I say, ChatGPT is my one of choice. Using these, you can learn pretty much anything in these areas very quickly. And I'm finding that within 2 to 5 days, I can build something, pretty much anything you like, as long as it's not super complex. So I've built video transcribers. I'm building a photo catalog. I'm using ChatGPT to tell me the difference between cosine and Euclidean facial recognition at the moment. I didn't know anything about that 2 days ago, and yet now I've got a pretty reasonable understanding of how it works. That really excites me.
Let me throw 2 questions back to you. Is it really helping make you an expert, or is it just giving you a surface level of knowledge that you can apply? And then do you think that you're having more success because of what we said earlier, that you're able to think more deeply and not take the first answer, but you're like, I need to apply this, and therefore I need to understand whether you want to call it prompt engineering or I like precision querying. There we go. I'm setting this up. Precision querying. Yes. So that you can really go in and ask all these critical questions of it and get the information out that you need.
Do you know what? I'll answer that, but I think what it's distilled in me is that you've got to start with a good understanding of the problem you're trying to solve. So when I've gone into this with quite a vague idea of what I'm trying to do, it's very easy to go down rabbit holes and create a mess with AI. But if you've got a very distinct idea, and so the one I'm working on at the moment is I wanted something to analyze 20,000 photos and group them by date and do facial recognition, let me search by person. Nothing Google Photos does this as well, but I didn't want to put it all in the cloud. I wanted control of my own data. And I think 4 to 5 days, I've essentially built that. But I started with a very clear idea of what I wanted to do. And then my tip for anybody who is doing vibe coding is that break it into small Lego-sized chunks. Don't try and bake one big problem. Break it into pieces, and you can use ChatGPT to help you break it into pieces and then solve each problem one by one and stitch them together. So my learning has been that I can pull on my background of understanding how to design a database, how to build a backend, even if I don't know the language that it's been built in. I don't really know Python. I'm getting better now. I do understand HTML, but my knowledge is 20 years old. If you know the building blocks and roughly how they work, and you've got a brain that thinks through these things, you can use AI to stitch them together and fill the gaps where you don't know and help you fill the gaps in your own knowledge. It doesn't do the work for you, or if it does, you won't get a great output, but it will help you do the work. It's an accelerator, a springboard.
I really liked what you just said, that you need to know the problem that you're solving in order to get the best outcome. If we go back to what we started this with, is the web dying, right? Or not the web, but the way that we search and query and find information. The entire way that we search for information now could and possibly needs to or must change. Because if, let's say, I'm going on a trip, right? If I go to Google now and I go to Paris, right, it's going to give me the top 3 breakfast places in Paris, right? That because we're going to get whatever, a TripAdvisor or somebody's top 10
You get 100 pages
list.
of results. You're like, what do I do with that?
Now,
You look at the first 10.
I know information about me. The large language model I'm using knows information about me. So I could say, just give me the top 5 breakfast places, but I could also understand how to query that. Give me the top 5 breakfast places that are open within my general time window, which is pretty early, 5 or 6 a.m., that meet the standards. And I'm being very simple here, but the way that we query information, the way that we prompt engineer is fundamentally going to change, because if everything goes to that sort of generative AI output, which is a singular output, is a flattened answer, you ask a question, you get an answer, we are going to have to become much better at the questions that we ask. I love that.
So here's a thought for you, and you just open a little door in my head. If we're going to a large language model, there is surely a very dangerous commercial opportunity there for say, I want to make sure my brand, my destination, my flight provider is in the recommendation that's been put forward. How do you monetize that? And that is coming like a freight train down the track. How do you actually ensure that ChatGPT gives me an answer that supports its sponsors, its advertisers?
That's a whole, how do you trust anything?
Yeah.
And it
will come. It will absolutely come.
If I'm on Netflix and I can't remember if they have a free version anymore because I pay for it, but I know they have one that's ad supported. What you're watching is an ad. But now if Netflix made, I'm watching 0 Day Now, or you take Stranger Things, and instead of the kids in Stranger Things drinking a Coke, they're drinking a Pepsi.
Yeah.
Boom, you don't even know that you're watching an advertisement, but it's in there. And so that's the same thing. I query, I get an answer, and that answer is full of, let's say, little nudges that are going to give it to me. And you could even go down something. If I said my top 5 breakfast, give me the top 5 breakfast places in Paris. Maybe it's not going to give me a link to, let's say, a breakfast place that is sponsored, but it's going to show me breakfast places that are next to places that are sponsored. It brings me in a general vicinity so that somebody else can target me with an advertisement. There's an entire sort of spider web mind map of like, how do you nudge people into doing things when they don't even know it? And there's no way to tell. Man, I blew my own mind. That was good.
But it reminds me of, I've seen a lot of stuff on social media recently about the Star Wars adverts. I don't know if you've seen this. The Star Wars adverts for the South American country doing beer adverts, but they couldn't chop it, end the movie partway through. So they stitched in what looks like a continuation of the movie where Obi Wan Kenobi's in the Death Star, and then it suddenly cuts to him as if he's reaching into a fridge and taking out a beer. I love that. It's such a way to undermine the movie, but at the same time, quite fun.
Okay, so then a future of advertising. Here's the shot. I have my AR glasses on. Now every single surface, every single wall, it is catered to me. It is contextual to me. Now I'm using Google or Microsoft ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude. It's getting me in the vicinity of areas that can now be targeted towards me. It is slightly nudging me to take trips in this way or that way, right? I want to see a beautiful sunset. I just need a picture for a presentation. Give me a beautiful sunset. It starts hitting me with nonstop sunsets from Santorini. Now all of a sudden I don't want to go to Paris. I want to go over to Greece, or I want to go to Italy or something. Right? That level of, you could call that advertising or propaganda, personalization. I know that's why, at least in the US, there was concern about TikTok, right? Because like with TikTok, you can control what videos are being seen, and you can start to nudge people. Now you're just giving them the answer, and you're nudging them. Boom. That is a propaganda tool that I hadn't really thought of until this conversation, but damn, is that a good one.
It really is. And when you think about, we don't just use ChatGPT and similar for entertainment now, we use it for work. It's such a ubiquitous tool within our lives, how much reach there is there. And like where Google realized it could monetize search, I'm sure that will come with ChatGPT too. How does that influence how we use it? If it's maybe not as overt as like a Facebook ad or a Google ad, maybe if it's within the narrative that we're getting, there are some concerns around that.
I'll give you one back and then I'll let you have the last word here. Have you seen the last season of Black Mirror?
Yes.
Okay. I think it is the first episode, but it's the one where oh God.
Yes.
Okay, there's a spoiler here. I apologize for this. The woman, I can't remember how she basically becomes a vegetable in a coma.
Yeah.
But then there's a service that can resuscitate her. It takes the contents of her brain, throws it on a service, and then provides that service.
Brain service.
Yeah. And one of the things that it talks about is as she's using the service, they cannot pay for the upgrade. She starts saying advertisements.
Yeah.
But it is pretty damn clear they're advertisements. Now, if you could imagine, you don't need this person to actually change their tone of voice, like all of a sudden recommend a cereal. It sounds like it's out of the Truman Show, right? The way that they're doing it. Instead, you just have this person slightly nudge, right? It was a husband and wife. Honey, I'd love to go grab breakfast. Do you want to go to this place? If you're in the grocery store, we've been getting this detergent for a long time. This one's on sale. Let's just grab this.
Yeah.
The level of naturalization that you could flow in advertising, propaganda, thought is absolutely out of control. Take that and wrap us up.
So I'll come back to what you were saying about the idea of getting so many search results on Google, and that my thought is that you only look at the top 10. You might have 100 more pages.
I don't think people even look at the top 10.
You rarely go to page 2. Sometimes you never go to page 3. So when we've got all these options, we don't actually want all these options. And I saw something again on social media this week about asking Google something, and it comes back with, I haven't got the right answer, but I've got 100 other answers for you. When we start to look at large language models, AI, as a replacement for search, what we're getting is very direct, too direct, I argue, but very direct answers. It gives you an easy answer of this is what you asked for, here's your answer. And we can foresee a future where we're controlling that by deciding who gets to provide that answer. But I quite like and am very scared of the idea that actually it could be done in our interests, where based on very deep personalization, I know what type of beer you like. And when you're saying, I need to find somewhere I can get a beer around here, where would you advise? It says, I know you drink these 2 beers. So there is a bar there that sells those 2 beers. And actually this third one, which is quite similar to what you like, here's a third option as well. That third option might be something that's a sponsored advert, but still meets the criteria of your personalization. So it's an added value option. You're still personalized, you're still getting the things you want, but there's a little prompt to give you something which you might like that has been paid for by somebody else. It's that fine line, though, between adding value and just pushing product that I'm sure we'll get wrong.
It's positive personalization versus sort of dark methods.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's see where it goes in the future. But Dunbar, as always, good week. Talk to you again next week.
See you next time.